Welcome to Being at Home with George. I'm excited to be here, and I want to talk about the possibility of saying yes to whatever is happening and staying hopeful, believing there's a solution. That whatever is happening is a learning opportunity, because here's the reality of the situation. Whatever is happening because the conditions are right for it to be happening. And one of the things we have to do is be with what is happening, even though it may not be what we'd like. So this past weekend, I was at my alma mater teaching. I was going to work with students coming in, freshmen and first year transfer students. That was the plan, that to work with those folks as part of a orientation weekend they had. And then we invited like 100 student athletes to the process. So we go to the venue and there's nobody there. So those people didn't show up. So the athletes started coming in. So we did get the athletes. And of course, the people that are hosting me, they're concerned about whether anybody's going to show up or not. I was cool about it. My idea was if one person shows up or five people show up, it's okay. I'll work with it. As we were doing this and we were kind of waiting around and it was getting close to the time we were supposed to start, gentleman comes in, he sits down, and this other older gentleman, he's an administrator of the place that I was giving this presentation. And this person seemed to be talking to him, harassing him, and he was sitting down, just being quiet, and the person just was in his face and was talking. And so I just went over and I said, "Excuse me, could you please take it outside? We're getting ready to give an orientation here, and you're disruptive." And I expected the person to say, "Okay, I'll take it outside." But the person continued to be obstinate and actually talked about, "Well, I'm going to go up and talk to everybody." He wanted to go up on stage. I said, "No, you can't do that. And you don't have the right to impose your will on me and the people here. And please leave. Please do not do that." And he wasn't trying to hear what I was saying. And I could feel myself feeling like, okay, so maybe I need to physically move this person because he's being disrespectful and he's coming into this space, which is part of my job is to hold this space or make this space safe for everyone else. And so people who are in there that shouldn't be in there, my job is to get them out of this space. So anyway, it was a little shocking, just the fact that he wasn't being reasonable and he couldn't even hear that. And he was so preoccupied with his own agenda that he really didn't care about what I thought or what impact he was having. As luck would have it, the gentleman that he was pursuing left, and then he left. And a few minutes later, we were able to begin the program. But it really bothered me because that's where I went to school. That's my alma mater. And I have this idea in my head that when you have a space and you're controlling the space, people who come in the space should be obedient or at least be respectful. And if you're not invited in the space, you shouldn't be there. And when I ask you to leave, you should go. Well, that didn't happen. And so when I thought about it and I wanted to reflect on it, there's a teaching, this is a learning opportunity, is to embrace it. I don't like it. It was very uncomfortable. It actually got me on the edge where I felt like I was priming myself to defend myself or to actually physically remove this person, although that's not what I wanted to do. But I got into that defensive mode. I got into the reaction mode simply because the person was trying to actually literally bully me or literally trying to impose his will on me and the group. And I thought about it and I reflected on it and said, okay, so what's the learning here? And I had to redo what I would have done differently. And I realized because I had the time pressure and the pressure of not people showing up, that there was no space for me to create or to be responding to what was happening. And it's really challenging. That's happened to me, and I'm sure it happens to all of us in a time where we feel like we don't have the time and we don't have time for this BS. We don't have the space or the bandwidth to really deal with it. And what I realized what was called for was for me to be able to create space to pause for the cause and just step back and say, okay, I know I have this stuff going on and I know all of these things are happening at once. But the most important thing is the person in front of me. And so maybe one of the things I could have done is said, okay, could we just go outside in the hallway? Let's talk about this. And just really listen to the person and just really hear him out and then talk about some of the solutions of what he might be able to do. But to be able to say, I feel you, I understand you, But at the same time, you're actually doing what you are complaining about, what you're protesting about. Somebody's imposing their will. In this case, I think it was something to do with using animals in experiments. You're worried about the rights of the animals or the rights of people doing things that are not okay and harmful. Yet you're doing the same thing with your cause, with your displaced anger, and you're talking to me, you're talking to the person that you're harassing, and we have nothing to do with that. We got no dog in that game. That we don't control that. We're not doing it. You have to go to the source. You can't come to us. And so I have this idea or this hope that he's able to at least know that I heard him and say, okay, this is not appropriate some other time, but at least get him out of there, hear him, and then go back into the space. And so to me, what's the lesson here? The lesson here is pause for the cause and then seek to understand and then to be understood. And that happens so many times that I'm feeling like all of this time pressure and the fact that I really don't have time for this, but I have to make time. The message is I don't really care who you are or how much poise you have or whatever. We all get triggered. And when we get triggered, we need to know that we get triggered and how are we going to respond and react to that being triggered. And in my case, I was able to have this self-regulation not to do anything that I would regret, but did I have the impulse to do something? Yes, I did have the impulse to protect myself. And so that's the whole thing, is that realizing when we get triggered, even though we may not physically act out, we feel violated, or I felt violated. I felt that the person really didn't relate to me as a whole person, related to me as a thing. And that doesn't feel good. And that would put me in my reptilian brain, which is going to fight, flee, or freeze. And in my case, it was more like the fight, because I imagine if there was hair on the back of my neck, like a target coming up when that happened. So I don't care who you are, you'll get triggered. And the idea is, can you respond to it? So even though I was reacting emotionally, physically, I was responding. I didn't do anything. But at the same time, I looked at it like, okay, saying yes to whatever is happening. And at the same time, believing that there's a solution, believing that this is a learning opportunity, even if it's not for him, at least for me. So the next time that happens, I have a little bit more compassion, a little bit more poise to be able to meet whatever's happening in a way where I'm able to say yes to it and to make it work.